Hello and welcome to the special edition of the Under Centre podcast. Darren Mara with you here. We are looking back at American football in Ireland over the year 2022. And I'm delighted to have a great bunch of guests here with me this evening. As always, I have Fionn Malloy, of course, us two representing the North Dublin Pirates in Division 2 this evening. Fionn, how are you?
I'm doing very well there.
Excellent stuff. 2 shows in a week. You are back for good this time now.
Yeah, I'm back on the horse. Fell off the wagon there for a little bit. I had to get some things sorted out, but it's all good, ready to rock now.
Look, like a prominent politician said, you realise that the grass isn't greener on the other side now, did you?
Not really. No, I shopped around. I couldn't get a better contract there, to be brutally honest with you.
The domestic game wouldn't have you.
Yeah, this is it.
No, we couldn't put the money up front, unfortunately.
And that is the voice of Joe Kinahan from the domestic game, also from the Westmeath Minotaurs. Joe, we're delighted to actually finally have you on the show. How are you?
Doing great. It's great to be on. We had a bit of a wacky old 2022 across all three divisions, so I'm excited to just dive straight into it, I suppose.
That's it. We'll try and cover as many areas as we can about, the ups and downs, and like you said, the roller coaster that was the AFI in 2022. And our fourth and definitely not least guest of this evening, that is Steve O'Rourke, a regular contributor on the show as well. But we're not talking about NFL tonight, Steve. We're going to be talking about the local game. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's makes a nice change to talk about the local scene than the NFL. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I didn't want you to sort of get too upset about talking about the Raiders too much now this evening, so we'll try and keep it as light and bubbly as possible. But I should probably send congratulations as well in advance about the new book.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very exciting. Kind of work 2.5 years work. Nice that it's finally public knowledge. So it's good it's out there, and looking forward to it getting into people's hands next March. So.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Looking forward to getting my copy for sure. But look, we will have a chat about. Like I mentioned off air, guys. We're going to keep this as light as possible. Try and keep as much as a round table as possible, so we can imagine that we have a nice tasty pint in front of us, and we're just talking about the year in the pub. But let's look at each team more individually. And Steve, I'll start with you on this one, of course, with the Dublin Rhinos, and of course, unfortunately relegated last year in the last day of the season. So I believe your first year as a head coach of the team, sort of first full season probably at them, and sort of overall, how did you feel the season went?
Yeah, could have gone better, I think is probably the summary. It's a funny one because I think it's really easy to forget like that when our season started, COVID was still a massive factor. And our first game against the Cowboys up in Craigavon, we travelled with 19 players, lost 11 players the week of the game because of COVID. Either they were close contacts or they had COVID. We asked the league, could we possibly have a postponement? And we were told, no, you have to play the game or it's a forfeit. That was frustrating. They did, to be fair to them, give us special dispensation to bring retirees out of retirement to play that game. But it's a funny one because you do all this prep for your first game of the season. Obviously it was my first year with the team, bringing in a whole new offensive playbook, trying to run a new system that we'd never run before. But I was pretty confident. We'd had a couple of preseason games. We'd had a really high scoring game against the Crusaders in a friendly. Came out 2 points on the wrong side of that, but like I was really happy with how the offense performed. And that defense needed a lot of work, but I was really happy with the offense. And then we played a game against Meath, where for whatever reason we had 6 different touchdowns chalked off because of offensive penalties, but the defense held Meath completely scoreless, and I don't think they had a first down in the game. So I was really happy with that side of the ball. So I thought, okay, we'd had a good run in this. We've got a decent chance, but we knew the 2 games against the Cowboys were going to be crucial. Like we knew if you could win both those games, we'd probably be safe. If we could win one of them and squeak a result somewhere else, then because that was the goal for the year was just to survive. And then the very first play of the game against the Cowboys, we ran a QB run, designed QB run play, where we took our slot receiver on the right hand side off that side of the field and brought him over to the left-hand side of the field into the X position. And that meant we'd no receivers on that side of the field. The Cowboys did not know how to react to it. They brought like 2 defenders from that side with the motion. So that right-hand side of the field was completely open with a quarterback who once ran a 12-second 100 meters. This was a touchdown, first play of the game. Except the guy going in motion tore his hamstring, and we got a delay of game penalty on the very first play of the game. And that was the sign of what was to come for the Rhinos season. So, and look, injuries happen. Like, completely get it, but like that was such a bad portent for the season. And then overall, I think we stayed. We just could not get the ball moving on offense for whatever reason. We often found ourselves behind in games, and we were always going to be a run first team. But when you're chasing a score, you kind of have to go to the pass, and we kind of struggled a lot. It was funny though, like, because the Rebels destroyed us. The Rebels and it was the first time I've ever gotten angry on the sideline after that game. And the lads reacted and bounced back really well. Like we held the Panthers really, really close. And then our probably best game of the season was against UCD. Like, we were 6-6 with UCD at halftime. We probably should have been 2 scores up on them. We had 4th and goal twice and got stopped twice because I decided not to kick field goal. And like, we really played well that game. And then the season kind of just fizzled out from there. We traveled to Belfast, and they had for the Trojans, they had 3 times the amount of players that we had. And then for the Knights game, I turned up and they had double the players we had, and they scored on their very first play, so it was done. But look, I can't fault the lads. And everyone who turned up, like, they put in a shift. But we didn't start 2 games this year. We started 1 game all season with what I would have considered our starting 11 on offense. And you know yourself, like, you have to have planned for injuries, but you can't ever expect to never be able to put out your best team. But at the end of the day, the table doesn't lie. And I think, it felt to me, and I would never have said this to the lads, but it felt to me from about 4 games in that relegation we would be very lucky to not get relegated. And it's a chance to reset and start again. And that's the way we have to look at it. I've stepped down as head coach. I should never have taken on head coach. It was too much. Just had a baby, writing a book, work, my actual job as well. It's an awful lot to take on, as well as coming up with an offensive playbook and then trying to run a team. So we're in much more capable hands now in Dahi Hosford, who's taken over as head coach, former punter with the team, been around the league for a long time. I'm quietly happy that, look, relegation, no one ever wants to be relegated, no one ever wants to lose, but sometimes you just have to take that 1 step back to take 2 steps forward, and that's what I hope will happen.
Yeah. And just like you mentioned with that, with players and stuff like that, with COVID, it was the first time in 3 years that we have had a season, and like that, it was probably, I think, what was it, like 13 weeks before the season started, we were told we were getting the go ahead to play. And the league didn't know where we were going to play. We didn't know if we were going to play, and that was tough. And that the players didn't know if we were going to play, and which was tough. And did you find that in that 3 year span you saw the drop off of, sort like, maybe veterans just deciding, look, I'm not coming back now, it's been too long, and not being able to recruit, sort of that sort of mixture, just sort of is a cocktail for disaster, pretty much?
Yeah, the recruiting was almost impossible because we tried to recruit like in October, the October before the season started, and we got like 2 guys down. And they were both former Pirates, actually. Sorry about that. But nobody wanted to commit to a sport, and no rookies wanted to commit to a new sport when they had no idea if there was a season going to happen or not. And I completely understand that. Like, whereas if you compare it to this year, and we've had over like 20 new people come down, like, the difference, because they know the season is going ahead, is just incredible. So I think, yeah, COVID definitely had a huge effect. Like, even little things like, we didn't get a bus up to the first game up in Craigavon. We all went in cars because people were worried about, being too many people on a bus or whatever. And it was all things like that kind of, like, it's yourself, like if you've ever tried to install a playbook either offensively or defensively, to try and do it on just video calls and one session a week, 1 2-hour session a week, it's almost impossible, So what was happening was we were relying on a lot of lads playing out of position, suddenly being asked to run routes when they've only ever been a cornerback before, things like that. So yeah, it definitely had an effect. Now I don't think it's the reason. I think there's it's one of many reasons why the season ended up the way it did. To be honest, I think the league handled it well eventually. COVID. I say eventually because the season before, when COVID was still kind of relatively new, we were down to play Cork the opening game of the season. Now, I wasn't head coach at this stage. I was just the OC at that stage. Chris Cullen was head coach. And we, I don't know if you know, but Paul Hosford plays with the Rhinos, and he's one of the foremost journalists in the country. And he was here at all these COVID briefings talking about how you shouldn't be gathering in large groups and you shouldn't be doing this and you shouldn't be doing that. And for that Cork game, we had 42 players registered. And the Cork game never went ahead because of COVID. As I said to you, we went up to Craigavon with 19 when football eventually returned 2 years later or 3 years later. So that's the difference. You've lost almost half your players. And other teams, it's not like we were the only ones who suffered. And I don't think we were. I think a lot of teams suffered. And I think, there's that thing that happens as well. When you're a winning team, it's really easy to get players to come and join your team or to turn up for training. When you're a losing team, it's really, really difficult to keep motivating people. I noticed something, and I don't want to make this all about the Rhinos because there's much more interesting stories from the season. But I noticed this thing that happened, and it wasn't deliberate. It wasn't deliberate at all. But we had a lot of coaches. We had I had 3 assistant coaches on offense, and our defensive coordinator had 2 assistant coaches. We had a lot of experience from lads who've been around the league for a long time. And when games would start, I'd be surrounded by coaches, and everyone would have an opinion. But by the time the game was over, I was kind of on my own because nobody wants to be associated with losing, and I completely understand it. I'm not criticizing anyone. I love the lads we have coaching. It's just that thing. It's that human nature is that when you're losing and when you've got that losing stink on you, it's completely natural that and plus I didn't want to talk to anyone. I was annoyed because that's my playbook and it's not working. So what have I done wrong? It was never the player's fault. It was obviously me not adapting and things like that. But it's all that kind of what I saw on a macro level, at a team level, that people wouldn't turn up to training because we were losing. Well, we're losing because you're not turning up to training. But then during a game, lads would be really into it at the start. But then when it started to drift away from us, the disinterest would kick in. And again, completely understandable. It's perfectly human reaction. And I don't blame anyone. All those losses, every single one of our 7 losses, sit with me for last season. But I found that I think going back to your question, the motivation that I would have seen around teams before, because this is the 3rd team I've been involved with in the league. The motivation around players was definitely at its lowest point at the start of last season. I think by the end of the season, I think when everyone knew, at the SBC level, we didn't have a game cancelled. I think that was a huge achievement for the league and things like that. I think the motivation factor was there, and I definitely see it this time around. Going into this season, just chatting to people I know around the league, lots of rookies turning up. Lots of people who are now know that there's going to be football are happy to be involved in it. I think that's great overall for the league. I think that's a really good thing.
Mm-hmm. And Joe, we're going to move down the division. We're going to talk about Division 1, especially with yourself and the Minotaurs. A fantastic year for them, obviously finishing up with that Division 1 ball game victory over the Vikings. And just the same sort of question I asked with Stephen there, a brief synopsis of how you felt the season has been overall.
Well, it kind of started a bit disjointed. Obviously, we'd had that preseason friendly with the Philadelphia Blue Flame, which I think went better than we really expected. We did next to nothing on offense in that game, but they're just so fast and physical. But we managed to squeak out a win there. And with all this momentum going, we were thinking, yeah, you know what, we've beaten an American team. We're the first Irish team to do that in however long. Let's get into this season now and really kick into it. And we were so excited. And then first game of the season is postponed. We're like, okay, fantastic. Definitely how that goes. Obviously, I've talked so much about the forfeits now on the domestic game that it's kind of become a parody now where people are always making fun of me talking about it. But they happened. 3 forfeits in a season is something you don't want to really have happen. But at the end of the day, there's nothing really that could have been avoided once the season started with the Eagles and Trinity. But yeah, like once we actually got to play games, it actually went quite well, on the field. Just felt like everything on offense was kind of clicking, and the defense especially was fantastic this year. Like guys like Jay McBride and who we were missing all year. He was on tour in Lebanon, so we had guys like Stephen Nally step up, and cornerbacks like young guys, Peter Dempsey, Jordan Lacey, like these guys only playing football maybe 2 years. I know Jordan's debut season was 2019. Like to have those guys step up in the way they did, especially in the final, like that's the sort of stuff that we'd kind of been missing the last couple of years, where we were kind of knocking on the door a little bit and slowly pushing our way in. And it's just that kind of influx of youth. Again, it's the same thing for most teams. It's just once you can get a really good recruiting year, you really see the productivity on the field step up. Like it's a numbers game at the end of the day. That's why the likes of, say, the Trojans and Rebels have done so well for so long. And you see UCD's team on the sideline this year, it looks like a bloody army showing up compared to some teams around the league. But we were lucky enough to have a pretty good year, or a pretty good COVID kind of off season in that regard. We may have been one of the few teams that actually probably increased in numbers, which we are so lucky and so thankful for, because it gave us a bit more to do and hide a couple of things that we could show from different players later on in the year. The one thing for me, looking back on it, especially the Vikings game that we lost. So we'd gone the whole season undefeated, and we thought, you know what, if we can finish this 8-0 and go on to a bowl game, that's fantastic. And UL came up to Mullingar and they smacked us silly. But it was humbling, like we didn't expect to be beaten in every aspect of the game as bad as we were. But I think in the long run, that actually probably helped us, because I think we put our guard up a bit more in the final. We were like, okay, we know that we have to be wary of you guys now. I think had we gone into that final against UL, having already beaten them in Limerick, and had we beaten them in Mullingar, I think we probably would have walked into that game thinking, yeah, it's Limerick, we've got it, and then have that 25-6 game happen in the final, which is not ideal. But yeah, we had a pretty good season after that. Obviously, we had the Crusaders in the semi-final. No, that's a lie. We didn't have the Crusaders. We had the Vipers in the semi-final, and then obviously the final, which I would have loved to have. Like it was great that it got streamed. The Vikings, fair play to them for getting a camera sorted in such short notice. I didn't realize that AFI weren't going to be able to sort something out themselves. But trying to watch that game back is a bit difficult because of the connection that was up there at the time, on the day, the internet connection. So it's a bit choppy. But yeah, that day was something else. Obviously, not being able to finish the game for myself, was a bit disappointing. But I'll take that if it meant we won any day of the week. I'd rather play a quarter and then go out injured and win the game than to lose another final. I couldn't deal with that heartbreak.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point that you make there about the recording itself and the fact that it wasn't, because obviously they did have a special weekend for the both Division 1 and Division 2 ball games at the same weekend up in, was it Newforge, wasn't it? That's where it was, up in Belfast one. Yes. And then obviously they had the Shamrock Ball the week after, which we were both working at in Kingspan Stadium, which obviously had its recording as well. And that's sort of one of the first questions that I'm going to open up to everybody. And Fiona, I know you haven't had a chance to come in yet, and I want to get your opinion on this too. But when it comes to these lower divisions, are you hoping or maybe looking to get maybe a bit more done to sort of prop up these divisions a little bit more now over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think it's more fun for everyone that way, isn't it? And I don't blame the AFI. Look, it's difficult to drum up false interest. I've don't envy that kind of job of creating a buzz around these lower teams. There's some ideas floating around there. I think there's some tools that are already available that can really be benefited. I do think a little bit of extra planning, like Joe said, make sure the connection's good, get a camera going, feel like there's a bit of emotion, a bit of commotion going on about the lower divisions that not only because AFI does look after them. We know that the people in there are all volunteers. They care deeply about American football in Ireland, and the lower divisions are necessary. There is not enough spaces on a football team for everyone to play up in the SBC. So these the lower two divisions, especially Division 2 for the development, and then Division 1 obviously as a more of a feeder to the SBC. They're vitally important to the football ecosystem. But it's just about, I guess, getting a bit more flow going, maybe off the pitch or in some less competitive aspects. The Division 2 team is never going to play an SBC team. I don't think ever should in terms of preseason friendlies or anything. But getting team bases together, getting coaches knowing players and players knowing players, and just a bit of buzz, a bit of outside football, I feel like will be great. I don't have the answers. Like I say, I don't hold it against the AFI for not getting this done. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's a very subtle thing to do. I think it's going to take years of careful planning, and some things are going to work that we're not expecting. Some things are going to go exactly as planned, and some things are just going to flop. But for me, it's always like, if I know guys on other teams, I was always in awe. We had one guy when we first started. I was on the original North Dublin Pirates team, and one of the players that used to play for the Drogheda Lightning, who played up in a much higher division than the Pirates have yet to get to. He knew guys off different teams. He was paying attention. He knew the coaches, and I think that draws. And it's not just going up. I think it will be great if the attention comes down a little bit, but it also has to be natural, right? Because otherwise, it's a little bit condescending, and you kind of have to be careful. Look, nobody's saying that every team in Ireland is equal and they just need a chance. And no, look, there's different tiers, and that's fine. But who's to say there isn't a guy in SB or in Division 2, as it's called now, that could go to an Ireland training. Okay, you might never get on a squad panel, but now guys are starting to see players from these other more obscure teams and get involved and talk to coaches and have a bit of banter and how he is getting on and what's going on, and we like to do this, and get the coaching flowing and the players flowing and the knowledge flowing. I think that's a good way. And like I said, I'm not putting any fault or blame on anybody that this hasn't happened yet. But for me, that's the next step. As a league, as all teams, as all individuals in the league, that's where we need to get to really care about all the other teams. At the moment, everyone cares a lot about their own team. You guys, I'm sure, have certain teams in your divisions that are your rivals, even if they don't see it the other way, right? There's always one team that we like to, let's get it going. Let's get the AFI going. College football, last game of the season is always rivalry week. You play your rival. Let's get this kind of stuff going, a bit of atmosphere going. Not that there isn't at the games, but look, I played for the Pirates. My very first game, we played against the Wexford Eagles. There was about 100 people at that game. That's by far the biggest crowd I've ever played American football against. It's never got past about 20, I'd say, since then. So I just love a bit more atmosphere. And again, it's not an easy thing to create, not an easy thing to manufacture and have it be authentic. But for me, I think that's got to be the ultimate goal of the AFI at the moment, because in terms of football, the SBC is in a great position. We see the Wolfhounds now really competing on an international stage. That's got to be the next thing, right? Get that real league feeling through all three tiers of American football in Ireland.
Biggest crowd we had all season was the day we gave away free ice cream at a game. Like, honestly, I swear to God, we had 150 people come down and watch Cork absolutely hammer us. But, like, Cork are a very good football team. But yeah, the free ice cream, everyone's family came down. And it's like, it's those simple things. Like, like, I've always had this point. Like, so my wife and kids, they come along they don't necessarily come to the whole game, but for every home game, they'll arrive down. And I think if everyone can just get like 3 or 4 people there for a game, it doesn't have to be for the whole game. You create an atmosphere, you get that kind of vibe going, but that has to be natural. There has to be a desire to do that. Like, me convincing my wife to travel to Donegal or Derry to to play the Vipers, that's never going to happen. But like, she can come across to Castleknock. That's not that big a deal. I think there's a few points there. One of the things, and maybe this is like way off base, and maybe nobody else thinks this is a good idea. It's certainly not the views of the Dublin Rhinos. These are purely my personal views. I think the worst thing we've done in this country in terms of football is put youth football in the hands of individual teams. I think youth football should be a collaborative effort between teams. I think there should be a Dublin-based youth team. There should be a Midlands-based youth team. There should be a Northern-based youth team. And I think the coaches should come from all the clubs. And that's not to say fair play. There's certain teams, and I think the Panthers and Cork are right up there, who've done an excellent job at setting up their youth programs. But that's not going to teach those kids are then committed to that team forever. And like, you could say fair play, like they've done the work there. But what I'm saying is, it goes back to what you said. It's if you're exposed to more coaches and more coaching and more types of coaching and more types of offenses, more types of defenses, you're going to become a better football player. And and flag is the same. I think flag is amazing. But I'd also like to see, like, I love the fact that flag has more teams that are separated from the original, the core kitted clubs. I think that's brilliant because, again, you're exposed to more people, you're exposed to more types of football. It's really, really positive for the sport. So I'd love to see that on a youth scale. I think that's a really simple thing. And the other thing I think that's such a simple fix, especially for streaming and especially for crowds, is double headers. There's enough teams based close enough together that you could just run double headers, run more of them, and run them on a Saturday evening. Like, do it on a Saturday evening when people can have a few cans on the sideline or something like that. Like, there's loads of ways of doing this that are organic, that are natural, and that don't actually take a huge amount of effort from the American Football Ireland, who, again, as everyone has pointed out, they're volunteers, and like, nobody's getting paid to do any of this. And least of all, the only people that are paid in this sport are the referees, like, which is kind of incredible. But that's a completely different conversation. I think that there's little steps, and they're not big asks, that could be taken to improve the sport as a whole. But I think the issue you come into, and maybe I'm being stupid about this, and maybe my thought process is wrong, but I want to grow the sport. I want players to be playing at a better level because that helps the Ireland team. That helps it helps the view of the sport in this country. Look how basketball is viewed compared to how football is viewed, right? Considering there are much more football fans in this country than there are basketball fans. You just have to look at Twitter on Sunday night to realize that's true. We just need to stop worrying about our own teams doing well and our own teams getting better, and at a level across the whole league, all 3 divisions need to think about how can we make football better. You'll never have full consensus on that. You'll always have people whose desire to win is much more important than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But I coach youths in different sports. The worst thing that happens is when you start coaching youth teams to win. You should be coaching them to be better players. That is all it is about. And to a certain extent, you have to consider football in this country as being at like a middle school or an early high school level, because that's the type of offenses and defenses that we run. That's the amount of training that we can do. So the focus should always be on improving the standard of the game here and not winning. But unless you get 100% consensus for that, it's not going to work. It needs every team's buy-in. And I'd love to see some sort of some sort of thing where everyone committed to this. And it's like you said, Fionn, like, let's have giant scrimmages. Let's have more of those. We've done those. Those are brilliant. We did one pre-COVID with Drogheda, and it was amazing. We all learned from it. Everyone walked away from it better you know. And I would love to see more of that, because what happens sometimes is you organize a giant scrimmage, but actually it's just a friendly, and you're trying to avoid paying for an ambulance. That's really what's happening. So I just think that there's, again, it's not, I don't think any of these things are huge asks, but it just requires a little bit of thought outside of your team. And I know that's so hard, and I know people turn around and say, well, no, my focus should be the Rhinos. But my focus is the sport. I love the sport. I want the sport to be better. And how we do that is shared knowledge. That's the simplest way to do that.
And I think you hit on a good point there, Stephen. Maybe some of this stuff is very budget friendly, let's say, but it's obviously time consuming. Like little things, I agree with you as well. Like making it feel bigger than it is a very American thing. We're playing an American sport. You mentioned high school, middle school in America. They come in, they have show bands, they have dancers, they have everything. I'm not saying we need that, but make it feel bigger. Have more of an Instagram presence, more of a Twitter presence. These are great free social medias that I think we can take a little bit more advantage of. I'm sure the league already has stuff in place. Joe, you lads on the domestic game do a great job of showing people that there's more than just the Rebels and the Trojans and UCD playing every week. It goes all the way down through the divisions. There's real storylines going on. You guys do a great job of making those storylines feel real, giving power rankings for all the leagues. Do you know what I mean? Making it feel like it's a real sport. It's a big sport. This is a national league. This is technically the top level of American football you can play in Ireland at a national level outside of the international game. So I think there's some things, and like I said, the problem is, yes, those things are free, but we know from running the podcast, it takes a lot of energy. We're so lucky we have Dara. Dara does the bulk of that grunt work, and it keeps that presence going. It helps us grow. It lets me put what I can to it, and then that helps Dara out, and it gets us all to be a bit bigger. But we need to get one guy on the ground to grab this thing and go, I'm going to get my mate who's great at graphics, and I'm going to make up deadly graphics about every game. We've started off now. Now we've got every fixture. Every week, if I want to know who's playing in Ireland, I can see it, whether it's on our show, on the domestic game, on the AFI Twitter. Now let's big it up. Let's start getting graphics. Let's see if we can get some videos. Let's see. I saw AFI already reached out and said, scores of the season. Look, I think that's a great idea. I think, unfortunately, just not enough teams have recordings of their scores. I think that's why they're struggling with that. But these are great ideas, and I think we got to get the passion going. There's definitely passion there, but let's use some of these cool new tools that are available to us. It is getting cheaper. It's getting faster to make these edits, to do these graphics, these videos, chop them together. You can put some cool music over it now. They're all inbuilt into these apps. So I think these are little things that can really grow the sport, especially to outside eyes, right? It's got to look cool. Do you want those young guys to start coming down, which we love? We got the vets as well, but the young guys, the athletes, because that's what we're competing at now, right? Now we've got the niche guys involved, but especially Division 2 is going to grow when we start getting those trickle-down athletes. At the moment, we've got people who are super passionate. They'll always have a spot. We will always train them to become better athletes. But as those natural athletes start filtering in, maybe coming away from GAM, maybe coming away from rugby as they watch it on a Sunday on Sky Sports or whatever, I think that to feel like you're part of a big sport, to feel like you're part of a national sport, no matter what level you're playing at, I think that could be really cool. And I think it's going to happen. I can see AFI making great strides to move that way. And I think we got to keep that going and really take advantage of some of the stuff that we already have on the menu.
Yeah, I mean, it is a combination of all that, isn't it? Like, you do need your youth scrimmages where, again, you're all pooled together and as many people are coaching up as many young lads and young players as possible. You need that social media presence. You know, I do a bit of content for the AFI with the whole reviews and stuff like that. And, you know, that's nothing. Like, all I'm doing is just typing about what happened at the weekend, but it's something. Now, we need a lot more. We need people who are a lot more qualified than me to be able to run a social media page effectively, like for a national organization. But like, there's other marketing sort of promotional type. Like, I would love, I don't know, was it 2019 or 2018, maybe even before that. There were like July 4th weekend, like Friday Night Light type things. The only one that I can remember the Minotaurs being part of was one in Meath, and that had a couple hundred people at it. There was a barbecue, there was music, there was a DJ, there was a live commentator, and again played in the lights, and that was fantastic, and that's the sort of stuff that drives interest in the game. I don't know if you can split it up geographically, so probably like a night in Cork where the Admirals are hosting, a night in Dublin where, say, maybe a Division 2 team, like yourselves, maybe the Pirates, and then one up in Belfast for maybe, or say the Vipers maybe host one, or maybe again Vipers host in Belfast, bigger area. But I think stuff like that, if you can get that like American holiday tie-in, like that's where you're going to get the most amount of interest from where our season takes place. Like nobody is going to be coming to an American football game in the middle of April when it's piss and rain. But when you've good weather, when it's decent out in the evening and American signs all over the place, you're like, oh yeah, sure, I'll pop over to that €5 entry or something like that. Like, I think if we can work the schedule that way, like that's a simple fix that automatically should, fingers crossed, drive the interest in those games at least, and hopefully a long-term effect is that interest in those teams builds up. And I think, again, it's just stuff like that hopefully over the next couple of years, the powers that be can be like, okay, yeah, let's take a couple of these on board, and maybe you'll get your royalties.
I think, Joe, I think you've got a great point there. And I think it goes, as you said, everything is going hand in hand, right? It all has to happen at the same time for this to grow. And if you combine these, like the two things that you and Steve were talking about, where maybe in the background, we don't even have to wait for the AFI. If we can get 3 teams with 3 coaches that have a good rapport, that have the same idea, if you can share just a little bit of resources, like you said, if we can organize a match where one team hosts, they got to pay for that field anyway already. If the other team can take some money that they already have, put on the barbecue so that when you pay your £5 in, it's free food. You'd be amazed, like you said, Steve, what free food can get you. All of a sudden, the atmosphere feels better. People are going to keep an eye out. When's the next one of these happening? The tickets at the gate obviously split it between the 2 teams. And yes, overall, you might lose money. But the reality is, lads, we all know we all lose money on every single game that we play. So if we can lose £250 more money a game, but put on twice the show with 100 people watching us, I'd much prefer that. I think that's going to look better for the game. It's going to make everybody's life easier. Joe, you're going to not have to bring in like reports from everywhere and compile them. In that 100 guys, there's got to be a guy from the league who can sit there, watch it, really take down the details. And all of a sudden now everything starts getting bigger, gets a bit faster, gets a bit flashier. I think sometimes the league, as it was growing, had to be rigid, right? You got to set things up. You put up all these bylaws in. I'm not saying get rid of any of them, but we can be a little bit more fluid. Why can't us and the Rhinos go to the league and say, you have us playing next week and the Rhinos playing this week. We'd rather both play this week, both at the Rhinos. We're going to put on the Pirates are going to contribute for a bit of a barbecue. The Rhinos have a young fella's like uncle or nephew wants to be a DJ. He's going to play some music at it for the exposure. We're going to have his banner up and tag it in him. And all of a sudden, for only a couple of £100 now, you've got a much bigger experience, a much bigger atmosphere, and a much bigger crowd. I think these are little things. We don't necessarily have to wait for the AFI to come along. If we've got like-minded coaches, we can create that. And then when the AFI sees it, they can help us by putting extra structures, extra support in there, opening up these lines of communication to say, well, how do you feel about playing? Or can we do like a Belfast rivalry day where the Knights play the Trojans in the SPC, or in a preseason friendly, or we get, do you know what I mean? There's enough, like you said, local rivalries, I think, that can make that go and really make it a spectacle.
I think the schedule thing is really interesting point that Joe made, because we played our first game the week before Paddy's Day, and we played 5 games in May and June. Like, there was no sense to that season. Like there is no sense to that season at all. But I know why it exists. It exists because we have college teams in our league. Every single one of our teams have players who go to college. It's not like we're not affected by exams. So and this is no slight, like the UCD were the best team in the country this year. This is no slight on them at all. This is no slight on any of the college teams. We are not a college league. We should not be adapting our season and affecting every single team in the league because we have 3 college-based teams. We just shouldn't be doing it. Like we're either going to give everyone the same break and we stop our season for 3 weeks or something in the middle of the summer and everybody stops, or nobody stops. Like it has to be like that. There has to be a level playing field. I think that's a really, really simple starting point. But I think there's so many, like, the thing is, I don't know if any of these points that we're talking about are ever discussed at an AFI level, because there is a focus on bylaws, on making sure that, like, oh, such and such a team were recruiting in such and such an area and they shouldn't have been, and things like that. And those things are important as well. But none of that grows the game. That's all very like GAA local committee kind of stuff that there needs to be. And like, I'm happy to volunteer to help with this, like if needs be, but there needs to be that kind of almost like a pool of people who care about the game here, who come together and go, here are our proposals for what will grow the sport here. It's not associated with any team. It's not associated with any division. These are simple steps that we can take. One of our lads made a really good point. Every single football, now Brazil is at a very different level compared to us. Every single game is recorded, and that tape is shared with every single team in the league. So there's not a requirement for teams to record games. The league is recording it. So there's no like, oh, we'll only record certain plays. They're recording everything, and everyone has access to that tape. That, to me, if we want to improve the coaching and the playing in this league, is such an easy thing to start. You get one person, and this is helped by double headers, isn't it? Because then you have the one person at the game. You give them 200 quid for the day to stay there. They're a film studies student or something. They have the gear, that kind of thing. They don't even have to know what they're looking at. They just point the camera at a certain place, and everyone has the tape. This is the thing to me. So if we want to tape another team, I have to lose a coach or a player from a training session because they're going to that game to tape it. So like that, to me, does like just a really small, that's one simple thing where we could all get better by the league just stepping in and going, actually, here's and this, again, I'm not criticizing the league. I think the league do almost an impossible job, because you're never going to keep everyone happy. Like, we all have different thoughts, so you're not going to keep all of us happy. But have they ever even explored that idea? Like in 2022, when Joe, you were saying, like, it's not even about taping it. These games should be streamed. Like they stream like the most random events in GAA, like, you know, a junior B, like, you know, hurling semi-final might be streamed, you know, on the local team's website. If they can do that, like in an era of 5G and better, like surely having a video access to every single snap taken in this country, regardless of the division, is the first step to us getting better as coaches, us getting better as players, and growing an interest. Because like you said, you might have this amazing touchdown, stick it on social, let it go viral. You know, I remember years ago, I used to work for the 42. I think it was someone on the Draw of the Lightning, one of the linemen, intercepted
a big flick up in the air, and he's running.
In for a fact, that was picked up by like Sports Center in the US from the story I did on the 42. It's things like that that grow the interest in the domestic sport here. And I think, like, you know, I hate to bring this up in front of Joe, because obviously, you know, Ty Henry in his podcast had that pop.
Yeah.
You know what, like, that was after the Rebels had played us, saw that we were playing 13 players by the end of that game, and they ran up a score. How's that growing the fucking sport here? That's not growing the sport here. Nobody's learning from that. So, like, I think we all think that we have the best interest in the sport in our head, but until we get past that idea that our team is the most important part of the whole thing, we're never growing as a sport. We're always going to keep that backward step. So while lots of people have made good points and lots of people have good intentions, actions are the most important thing now. It's like, what are you actually doing to grow the sport? What are you actually doing to make this a better experience for fans, for players, and things like that? So yeah, like there's a lot here, but I think like this is what we're 35 minutes or whatever it is into a discussion, and we've come up with maybe 24 ideas. You can't tell me that at least one of those ideas won't grow the sport here in a really simple, cost-effective way. I just think the league is missing a trick here, by not at least putting that process in place to get those ideas on board.
Yeah, and look, and that's it. And look, myself and Fiona have talked at training sessions before when it comes to things like this. When it comes to, if we just circle back to the social media things again, you can't tell me that there's not either like 3 guys, maybe 4 guys at different parts of the country that they can't say, right, here's the AFI login for the Instagram. Go to a game in your local area today. Put it out on social media. At least get some, like, even if you're starting with baby steps, for like a score update for anyone that wants to know what's going on in that game. Even if someone scrolling by sees that there's a game in that area, that we can say, oh well, let's go down, let's have a look. Even something as simple as obviously this show, and obviously yourself, Joe, as well, with the domestic game as well. And I think the other show, the Irish NFL show, took it on themselves to, make sure every Sunday that people were updated on the scores of that day. Something as simple as that. And look, I don't know if it wasn't for like podcasts taking on that and deciding, look, we have to showcase the game. I don't know if that would have happened this year. Joe, you doing the reports are great as well. But like that, it's these, we have these steps of, like, I know, and some fantastic ideas here tonight. These baby steps that if we start with this, we can move up to that. And look, I don't know. I'll like, the plan is to send this show anyway to them. If you guys listen, great. We just want like 12% credit for this. I'll share it out evenly, 3% each for everyone.
I'm included in that. Lovely. Okay, I didn't know I was getting paid for this appearance, but that's a great bonus. Love that.
Well, look, see, that's what we look after, I guess, here on this one. But
yeah, come on more.
I want to ask, because there is a team that does sort of set the standard, and look, I look after the Pirates' sort of social media as best I can, and I've made a point of emphasis of trying to put videos out, trying to post out, and trying to get people's attention out there. But I look at the sort of example that, say, the Trojans put out there. Now, people might give out about, like, oh, they're doing a mic'd up series, they're doing a behind the scenes series, like, why they're just the Trojans. But they're sort of trying to set a standard, and I don't know how you guys feel on that, with that sort of that standard that they're trying to set, trying to get as much professionalism into the game as they can. And I think they are the team that a lot of us can sort of, look at and take some, points from, to sort of improve our own side of things. And look, I do the social media for this show. I do the social media. I know it's a pain in the hole sometimes to try and do it, especially doing a post or editing videos or doing whatever and stuff like that. And look, my partner will tell you, she doesn't sees me with a laptop on my lap editing something almost every night of the week. But these sort of steps, what do you think, that how big of a thing social media is going to be now in sort of, getting our name and getting that sort of thing, like each team improving sort of their social media presence?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to fake it till you make it, Dara, really, doesn't it? Like, we are as big and as influential and as important as we make ourselves. The bigger, the louder, the brasher, the fancier we shout, the more everyone else is going to believe it, and they're going to come along for the show, the spectacle. It is one of the great aspects of this sport. It does make a great spectacle, and it's going to take a lot of work. It is definitely going to take a lot of teamwork, but I think it's there. I think you fake it till you make it. You be as loud as you can, and you put out a product that people want to have a look at.
Yeah, I mean, you see the Trojans, like on game day, they have their their starting lineups, and this is our offensive and defensive captains for today, and lovely graphics that they went for a photo shoot to sort of do up for all the players. And I can't remember the name of the big inflatable Trojan they had up, and the big helmet as well that they're all running like that. my first reaction to that was, this is so stupid. But I actually took a second. I was like, you know what? They've made the effort and they've put in that time to be like, you know what? We're going to get this sorted. We're going to make this look as big and as grand as possible for this day that at the end of the day was to help raise money for charity, which is another plus. But you know, they've gone to all that, and they're the only team in Ireland to have done that, and they made it as American as possible, and it ended up working out for them. I think like they'd a lot of people at their games. I think every game day they'd pretty good attendance, especially compared to the rest of Ireland. And it's that sort of stuff that, again, like you said, it's kind of driving up the professionalism in Ireland slowly but surely. And I think the more other clubs and AFI especially catch on to that themselves and build on their own professionalism, the bigger and better hopefully this gets. Again, hopefully sooner rather than later, but it is a process at the end of the day, you know.
I think my reaction to the Trojans was exactly the same as Joe's. My first was, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, but when you actually do take a step back from it, so I think caveat all this with the Trojans have the best ground in the country. You've got your stand, you've got your bar right there, you've got your dressing room right there, you've got an area for loads of parking, you've got an area for, like, if you come to a game in Castleknock, you have to walk 15 minutes to get to the pitch from where you park. Like, it's little things like that that are big differences, like, and ultimately attracting people to come to games. But I was looking at them the day we were playing them, and I was looking at the stuff. I was looking at like the big inflatable helmet that they run through. I was looking at the free pizza that we're giving away. I was looking at the DJ and listening to the DJ. And you know, he emailed us 2 nights before the game to say, "Can you give us the name and like squad numbers for all your players and things like that?" Because they cared. They wanted to make the announcements. They wanted the people at the fans to or at the game to kind of know who was catching the ball or not. Like. And then I looked to and that was to my left, and then I looked to my right, and I'm seeing 53 guys in gear. And I'm going, the reason they have the thing on the right is because of the thing on the left. It's not the other way around. They don't have all that stuff because they have the players. They have those players because they do all that stuff off the field. The Trojans, I know some people will see it as gimmicky, or they'll see it as this or that, but they are exceptional at this. They are the benchmark for what this sport could be. Every single team with the right location, you know, we don't necessarily all have the best locations in terms of our home games, but with the right location could do something similar. We might not achieve it, but as Sean said, you fake it till you make it. You go big or you go home. Like we had a joke mascot, like of like a guy literally paid €15 on Amazon for an inflatable rhino and then refused to wear it for the game. But like, you know, you never know. So kid might come up and get a photograph taken with that, and then he wants to come back to the next game. He drags his parents along, and his dad sees the game and he goes, "I'd like to try this," and he comes down to training the next week. It all can have a knock-on effect that you actually don't realize it's going to have. And likewise, it's the thing, like the photo shoot that they did, like that, those things cost money, and like money is hard to come by in our sport. Like we're all probably out of pocket from this sport that I don't even want to think about how much I spent during the year on football, you know. And I wonder, are we missing a massive trick in not pooling resources across the league the way they do in the NFL? Like every single time I buy a Raiders hat or a Raiders jumper, the other 31 teams in the NFL benefit from that. If they can do it on a mass commercial level, why can't we have a national league sponsor? Why can't the SBC be sponsored and that money divvied up between the teams? Why can't the league, you know, Divisions 1, Divisions 2, the same thing happen? Like there's work involved in that. It's an effort to get that to happen. But if you want teams to get better and if you want teams to grow, you can't be asking coaches and players to constantly keep going back to the well, to keep putting their hands in their pocket. We're very lucky on the Rhinos. Like, their sponsors are absolutely amazing and they've always been great. They didn't pay for an advertising slot on this, so I'm not going to mention them by name, but they've been brilliant. They have been brilliant to us. I cannot fault them. Not every team is that lucky. Like, not every team is that. Like, you see teams having to do bag packs. You see teams having to walk into the shopping center and shake hands, like, still in 2022. So I think, again, it's that thing. Every single point, I feel like I'm a broken record, but it all goes back to thinking outside of your team and outside of your division and thinking about, well, what will benefit the league? What will make us all better? What will make us all enjoy it more? Because my God, is it like a slog? You know, doing social media for a team that's winning is the best feeling in the world. Doing social media for a team that's down 6 scores, that's a tough slog, like, you know. And I don't blame teams that stop tweeting and stop updating their Instagram during games when they're losing. But if there's someone else, if there's someone independent of us, of the team, doing that reporting, doing that like update from the game, then it's that bit easier, I think, as well. So yeah, the Trojans, I think, fair play to them, because, you know, when I first started in football in this country, far too long ago to remember, they didn't exist. And now they are like, I know they didn't have a great season this year, and I know they were very much a home and away team this year, but look how good they were at home. Look how much money they raised for charity, and look how much interest. The Trojans are pretty much the only team that constantly generate media coverage as well. And they do that because they reach out to the newspapers and they let them know that they're doing these things. And that's, I think, I would happily sit in on a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting where the Trojans sit down and tell the league how to do it. Like, what's your secrets? Like, what do you do to get Budweiser as a sponsor, for example? Like, you know, it's things like that I would be fascinated to learn from a growing the game point of view.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to ask very quickly, because I know we're a little short for time at the moment, and I'd love to get your opinions on it, because there was the recent general or annual AGM, annual general meeting, sorry, AGM, I should have just said that, where the league's a proposed new league structure was ultimately actually not voted on in the end, changing Division 1 and 2 to more one of the proposals was a north and south. Now, obviously, myself and Fionn being biased in that way, we felt that was going to be sort of extremely unfair, because most of the teams in Division 2 were up north anyway at the time. Would have been all, and they would have all been part of the north in the proposed structure, including Dundalk. I think Trinity actually would have been the only other team, and it would have been with yourselves, obviously, Steve, and I think the Vikings would have been there with us too. And a big issue was travel that was brought up at the time, and I'd just love to get your opinions on it. Like I said, us ourselves, the Pirates, we didn't get to mention it obviously at the start. I should have asked that. Obviously the Pirates obviously didn't have the best year either. Postponements were an issue on our side too, getting numbers. You know, we were lucky that the Bulldogs unfortunately folded, and a few of their players wanted to come over and play for us, and we're thankful that they did, that we actually got to play football this year. And, you know, like with you, Steve, numbers were a big issue. At times we were getting down to 14, 15 players going into a match day, and it got down to maybe 12, 13 by the end of the game, including injuries. But, you know, we didn't have a problem with the sort of league at the time in the structure. Now, we had issues, and Fiona, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more on it, but we had issues with how the Mavericks came down from 2 divisions getting to play, and despite still having, you know, SBC quality players still in their team. But Fiona, I'll go to you even first on this one. Like, the proposed league structure, you weren't in favour as well with myself, and I don't know if you want to go into a little more detail with it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I appreciate it is what we're talking about, all this show, looking at things from a different angle. Can we change what we've done traditionally to try and improve the game? I see where it was coming from. Personally, I don't agree with the logic. I think that the big problem was not necessarily the travel, it was the player numbers, and I don't think that's inherently affected by travel. I think most clubs have enough of an idea now how much a season costs. There is good budgeting being done by all the teams. The league will admit that the financial system or the financial health of each of the clubs, while it can be much better, is definitely much improved than it was years ago. So look, we know how much buses are going to cost. We know what teams are going to be in the league. I do like the system that it's currently at. And I do also believe, as much as we like to say football in Ireland is very close, I do still think there's a distinct level difference between Division 2 and Division 1. I think that is there. I think we have to accept that. And like the guys already mentioned, like Steve spoke on, when you're losing, that's really hard to keep players. And so it needs to be competitive. You can lose and feel close and you'll keep guys engaged. If it's over at halftime in 6 of the 7 games that you play, it's going to be very difficult to end the season. So look, I'll keep it brief from here on. I do like the way the structure is at the moment. I do have sympathy for the league with respect to the Dundalk situation. I think that was an unfortunate set of circumstances. These bylaws, as Steve mentioned earlier, look, they're not glamorous. They do have to be in place, and sometimes they lead to unexpected consequences like that. I think everyone can agree it was a surprise, right? They didn't win the division. That's a surprise. And look, we all have to deal with it. Look, if the worst thing is we all have to play Louth next year and then they win and go up, that's fine. Guess what? The rest of the league should still be competitive as well. If we're the only team up in what is essentially Division 1, I think that would be a much worse overall health-wise for the league and for obviously a selfish point of view for the Pirates as well. So I am personally in favor of keeping with the league as it is. Let's let Dundalk play Dundalk play it out. Let's see how it goes. The Mavericks. Let's see how they go. If they can win the league this year, great. That'll get them back on track. Everyone else will be back to order. And let's just go and play football now. Let's keep it as consistent as we can and just go and play football.
I slightly disagree. I think the travel is a big issue. I think there is an argument there. So I see their viewpoint in why they wanted to reduce the travel, because I think it's not necessarily even a financial thing. It's actually about getting guys onto buses willing to take a 3 or 4 hour trip, play a 3 hour game, and then take a 3 or 4 hour trip back. However, I think more important is competitiveness. And I think if you have a former SBC team playing a Division 2 team, there should be a gulf in quality there. Not necessarily quality. Sorry, quality is the wrong word. Experience, because usually the Division 2 teams are newer, and that's the biggest one. And then numbers. Numbers tends to be the other deciding factor. So for me, I think fairness is the most important thing, and I think having a competitive league where people are going, ooh, will it be the Vikings? Will it be the Rhinos? Will it be whoever go up this year? Is much more important than anyone going, oh, well, at least you only had like 800 kilometers total travel this year, because nobody's talking about that once the season is over. I wonder though, like, do we need, if we're doing a development league, does that need to be a league where maybe we have, not necessarily, I'm not saying 4 divisions, but maybe we do have 3 divisions, and the SBC is the SBC. The second tier is for teams that have come down from the SBC, or older teams, or things like that, and teams who have made the leap from that developmental thing. My wonder about the developmental thing is, should we reduce the number of teams there? And let's make it more competitive. You play each other twice. You introduce that rivalry element. So you have maybe 4 teams there, or 6 teams at most. And you play each other more often, but you do play. You have those 6 games a season, or 5 games a season. You have competitive football that guys are interested in because they've got a chance at winning a bowl at the end of it. To me, that is the key, is that it has to be competitive. You can't have a team, I'm not going to name names, who give up halfway through the season, and we're always going to give up halfway through the season because that's what they've done for 3 or 4 seasons. Like, you can't have that. That's not a developmental league. That's a team who you have lads who want to play football up to a certain point, and then they're gone home for the rest of the summer. That's helping nobody. And it goes back to my point. You either have a level playing field for everyone, or you don't. So I think give guys competitive football, give guys a chance to be in games. Nobody in any sport is interested in playing when you've no chance of winning at halftime. That's no good to anyone. So I think, forget about the travel. It's not important. What's important is I even look at the Minotaurs and ourselves, right? I would like to think that I think the Minotaurs probably, based on last season, head to head, win 3 out of 5 games against us, right? Based on how our teams performed last season. I think this season it's probably the same, but there's a middle ground here of teams who float between the SBC and Division 1, and then there's a middle ground between teams who float between Divisions 1 and Divisions 2. Those teams should be playing each other more often. They're the ones who should be playing, most often, because you're going to get the most exciting games. You're going to learn the most because you're going up against, as I said to you earlier on, we were so often behind in games, we'd have to abandon the run game. And my QB, who's an excellent running quarterback, has no chance to actually show his skills. And it's little things like that I think, I wonder, do you take something like Rugby 7 system where, you have those, I'm not saying participation trophies, but you have a developmental champion. You have a team they have a chance to play against 2 of the developmental teams, say, for example, have a chance to play off in a game that has something on the line at the end of it, and whether that is the team dropping down. There also is that argument is that the League of Ireland, where you have one of the teams dropping down, plays one of the teams coming up, because the level is so close, and that's a relegation promotion playoff. That's an exciting game for everyone to be involved in, as well. So again, it comes back to me that just let's not settle on a league that suits one thing. So travel in the case of the proposal, or competitiveness in let's find something that matches everything. And I think I'm not saying introducing a relegation promotion playoff is the most revolutionary idea, but it means that there's competitive games right the way through the season. Even if you're the worst team in the SBC or the worst team in Division 1, you still have a competitive game that everyone's willing to show up and train for at the end of the season. And that could be important. That could be the difference between getting, 40 people down for your last training session and 20. So I don't know. I think there's more to be done with the structure than just simply basing it off the idea of lads don't want to travel. I really don't think that's a great way of doing it at all.
I think it was just it was very reactionary from how the season went. Obviously, nothing changing in the Premier Division because no forfeits, but then you go down and you have obviously what happened in Division 1, where the 4 teams that made the playoffs were the 4 teams that were remaining in the division because the other 2 folded. And I think it's when you have such small divisions, you're leaving yourself open to something like that. Not to knock the Crusaders, right? Crusaders are a good team. They do good players, and they seem to be rebuilding something, which fair play to them, right? Were they a playoff team? I know they came close against the Vikings in the semi-final, but they went 1 oh god, what did they go? 1-3-1 in games that they played, I believe. 1-3-1. Now I know there's teams in the NFL that'll probably end up in the playoffs at 7-10, knowing how the NFC South is going. But that shouldn't really be happening. So I see why they were trying to expand how many teams are in one division with the North and the South. But again, it's that whole case of you're combining you're leaving a higher parity of skill level. I think combining that eventually brings competitiveness, but in the short term, if that drives players out of teams who are on that lower level, then it's going to kill those clubs immediately. So you're kind of hoping that they survive, but then it's kind of leading to the same problem in that you're hoping teams survive a season in order to help grow. So you're in the same position as you were when you had the divisions separate, or the 2 smaller divisions. So again, it's just that case of maybe trialing this North and South and see how it goes for 2 seasons. And again, I know that's risking it, potentially risking clubs there, but again, it's that whole case of I'd rather try it and know it didn't work, and then throw something else at the wall, because at least then it's an active trying out ideas and trying to bring every club closer in competitive level. Because again, like you said, Fionn, there is a difference between bottom of Div 2 and top of Div 1 or bottom of Premier Division. I think when you go to, say, if you look at across the IRC there in the Premier League and Championship, you know, those teams kind of between mid-table and in the Premier League, mid-table and Championship, they're all roughly kind of even. And when you transfer that over to here, there is a massive gap. So I do like that they're trying something to bring that gap a little smaller. So maybe try it out. I don't know. Again, there's pros and cons to every kind of decision you're going to make. So I'd rather they make a call on it sooner rather than later, at least, so we know where we stand, as opposed to having been, what are we, 3 weeks now from the AGM and still not really having an answer.
Yeah. Can I just say one more thing on competitiveness as well? Because I think this is important. We have, even within the SPC and division, the Premier Division, there's a huge gulf between the top 3 teams and everyone else. Like the Panthers, I think we would all consider the Panthers one of the most successful teams in the country and one of the best run teams in the country. I think they're an declaration of interest. I'm a former coach of the Panthers. I think they're a very well run club. The Panthers consistently reach semi-finals and playoffs, have never had a winning season in their history. Even the year they reached the Shamrock Bowl, because they lost the Shamrock Bowl, they had a tied season, they had an equal season. They've never had a winning season. And yet there's a team that consistently makes the playoffs. So you can succeed in this sport while still losing a lot of games. Ultimately, the cream consistently rises to the top, as we saw the year Cork won it, all the years the Trojans have won it, and obviously this year with UCD. Like UCD are a phenomenal outfit, and it paid off for them this year. I think it worked really well. But if you can get to that level, if you can get to the SBC level, to that Premier Division level, you have a realistic chance, if you can win 3 games, of making the playoffs. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know if it's a good thing. I genuinely don't know if it's a good thing. I think it gives teams an extra competitive game at the end of a season, but is it putting teams into a false position of thinking they're better than they are, or not feeling like they don't need to take another step? So like there's lots of questions around, like you could almost break our entire league structure into like micro divisions of 4 teams and have those 4 teams play each other twice every year. Like you really could do that, because that's where the groupings are there. Now, we're never getting to that. We're never getting to that stage, I don't think, because I think people will lose interest too quickly, and they'll run out with names for the bowls as well, which is, going to be a problem. But I do think we are much more.
I don't know, the under center ball has a good ring to it.
Nice, there you go. Great opportunity. But I do think that we're much more. Like I think we could all sit down with a list of the kitted football teams in this country and group them into like pods of 4, where you go, Jesus, that's a really competitive division. Like that would produce 6 really good games of football for each team. But we're not big enough as a sport to start thinking that kind of on that micro level. We have to have a division of 8 teams as our top tier, but which is a shame, because really there's 2 divisions within that top division, and everyone's kind of battling to stay up in the bottom 4 and for the playoffs in the top 4. But I do like the idea of making as many games mean something as possible. And Joe, I know what you're saying about like trial it, because it's something different and you never know, it might work. But when you look at the chance that a former SBC team could be playing a former Division 2 team this year, like, Jesus, don't get me wrong, the Pirates could turn around and beat the Rhinos. There's no question that could happen. But on paper, at least, it doesn't look like a fair matchup. It doesn't look like a fair thing to ask a team to do, especially a team that's trying to grow. Like the Rhinos have been around a long time, and we've got a lot of veterans. Like the Pirates are still a relatively new football team in this country, and they need to be. I'm not telling you, Fionn or Dara, anything you don't know already, but like you need to be given a chance to grow as a team. Like you need to be given an opportunity to add to your numbers, to get coaches in, to get players in. That's not going to happen if you're losing games 30 or 40 nil on a consistent basis. I know it's not going to happen because I just experienced it at an SBC level. So I think let's keep it in a way that's fairest for everyone, because again, it comes back to just making the sport better and more fun. Like, Jesus, we're all giving up enough time that we should be enjoying it. Like, there is, I drove home from the Knights game on my own, and it's probably the most miserable 2 hours I've ever spent in a car. And I thought to myself at one stage, somewhere around, like, I don't know, Enfield, I was like, why are you doing this if it's not fun? Like, it's a hobby at the end of the day, like, and it should be fun. And we are losing people for whom it's no longer fun. And we need to keep those people and get those people back into the sport, because they're the lifeblood of the sport. You can have the best coaches in the world. You can have, you know, all the great stuff around games. If people aren't enjoying themselves, you're not going to turn up on a cold Sunday morning, you know, in the snow and ice to train. You're just not going to do it. And let the way to do that is by making sure they have competitive games to play every Sunday.
Yeah. I think that is going to be a perfect place to wrap up this show, guys. We could probably talk for another 3 or 4 hours for sure about what could be done. And look, maybe it's something we can revisit again in the new year when we get closer to the league season. But I'd really want to thank both yourself, Steve, and Joe, for taking the time to speak to me today. And I hope you enjoyed the chat.
Really did. Apologies if we get the Rhinos deducted points for anything I said. I didn't mean it.
The views did not represent those of the
No, they're purely personal views. Yeah.
It'll just be a personal fine then, so Steve.
Yeah, that's fine. Use the book revenue, you know.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, this is just to go back to what you were saying about hoping you enjoyed, like, you know, that this is what we're here for, you know, like, this is the sort of stuff that hopefully will help grow more conversations, not just in the AFI board, but around other clubs. And like you were saying, Steve, maybe Panthers talk to the Rebels, who talk to the Trojans, and there's a thing thrown together. And, you know, hopefully we've started something here that drives a bit of change in the future. Fingers crossed.
Definitely, for sure. And if not, I just have the scene of, like, Bender and Futurama getting kicked out of the moon saying, screw you, we'll make our own league, you know, with better league, with 4th of July celebrations and double headers.
And free ice cream. Don't forget the free ice cream.
And free ice cream.
Free ice cream.
Yeah.
Don't forget the free ice cream as well. That is the main selling point. We'll have to have the league sponsored by HB or something like that. For sure.
Oh, stop. That'd be unreal. I don't think I'd go. Don't think I'd get to training anymore. I'd just be there for the games, on the sideline, stuff in my face with brunches.
That'll be incentivize you to go to training, you know. There you go.
Oh,
your free ice cream for every training session.
You're paying me in.
Definitely get the big lads
there.
Definitely get me running around the pitch if I know that I'm chasing after, like, a brunch or something like that, or a twister. But like that, and Fionn as well, thank you so much for taking the time speaking.
Pleasure as always, Dara. Pleasure as always.
That has been our review of the AFI season of 2022. We are really looking forward to the 2023 season, whichever way that may be. I'm sure all of us are itching to just get back to start playing and hitting people, or Steve's case, coaching people to hit people, you know, because he's the one smart enough to. You're the one smart enough to not do it anymore. You just tell other people to do it. So I admire you for that, for sure. Before we do go, make sure you are following the show on Twitter at UnderCenterPod, the same on Instagram at UnderCenterPod. Follow us on YouTube, or if you want to listen to podcasts on the go, just search Undercenter Podcast. That's where you'll find us. Subscribe, follow, do whatever you need to there. Joe, before we go, do you want to plug the domestic game as well, where they can follow you on that?
Absolutely not. No. The domestic game on Instagram, on Facebook. Follow me while you're at it as well. Why not? If you can find me.
Yeah. And Steve, where can people follow you for book info as well for when it's coming out?
Book info, yeah. I have to start getting good at that, yeah. So Steve O'Rourke, OH Rourke, on Twitter, Instagram, all the usuals. I'm even on TikTok now because I'm young and cool. I don't post on TikTok. Yeah, the book is called And the Bang on the Ear. It's a biography of a 15-year-old who went up to head the ball in a game of football and was in a coma for 3 months afterwards, and about his life since that accident. It's out in O'Brien Press in March 2023, available in all good bookshops and some terrible bookshops as well.
And then
Cool.
also, if you are listening to this, we should mention as well, and you are interested in playing American football, there is plenty of clubs all over Ireland that you can find if you want to join. Give it a shot. Even if you have to ask the team any questions, you can go to American Football Ireland to find your local club. If you're in Dublin, around the Castleknock area and stuff like that, you can, of course, contact Steve with the Dublin Rhinos. If you're around Westmeath, Joe and the Minotaurs are there for you. If you're in North Dublin, maybe a little away from Castleknock, maybe closer to Donamead and Santry, there's a North Dublin Pirates for you as well. Like I says, all of our Instagram pages are there. Send a question into it, and I'm sure the lads and ourselves will be able to answer it as much as we can. But like I said, that's where we're going to wrap up this edition of the show. We will be back again next week, looking back at the NFL as per usual. But until next time, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.